I was 14 years old the night my brother decided I wasn't worth the inconvenience. It was a Thursday in November. I remember because the school had just put up the first paper turkeys in the hallway windows, and I thought they looked ridiculous. My brother, I'll call him by what he was to me then, which was everything, had promised to pick me up from my friend Dana's house at 9 o'clock. Dana lived 20 minutes away in a part of town I didn't know well. I didn't have a phone. I had $7 in my jacket pocket and a backpack with a half-finished history project inside it. He never came. I stood on Dana's porch until her mother turned the lights off at 10:30 and asked, gently but firmly, if there was someone I could call. I said yes. I walked to the end of the driveway so she wouldn't hear me and stood there in the cold with no one to call at all. My brother was 19. Our mother had gone back to work the overnight shift at the hospital 3 months earlier, ever since our father left and took his income with him. That left my brother in charge of me on weeknights. He had a girlfriend named Brianna who lived 45 minutes in the other direction, and I knew, even at 14, that I was the thing standing between him and the life he wanted. He'd made that clear in small ways for months. Sighing when I asked for a ride, leaving dinner on the stove without telling me it was ready, forgetting to sign my permission slips. That night, forgetting became something else entirely. I walked to a gas station 4 blocks away because the lights were on and I could see a woman behind the counter. I told her my brother was supposed to pick me up and wasn't answering. She let me use the store phone. I called our house. No answer. I called 3 times. She was a heavy-set woman in her 50s named Glenda, and she had the kind of face that had seen enough of the world to not be shocked by any of it. She didn't ask me a lot of questions. She handed me a hot chocolate from the machine by the door and told me to sit on the stool near the register while she figured something out. A police officer came 20 minutes later, not because of an emergency. Glenda had called a non-emergency line, calmly, like she'd done it before. The officer was young, maybe late 20s, and he drove me home. My brother's car was in the driveway. Every light in the house was off. I knocked. It took 4 minutes for my brother to open the door. He was in a t-shirt, hair messy, and he looked at me with an expression I will never forget. Not guilt, not relief, annoyance. "Oh," he said, "I thought you got a ride with Dana's mom." He hadn't called. He hadn't tried to reach the house phone at Dana's. He had simply decided at some point during his evening that I had probably figured it out and gone to sleep. The officer spoke to him at the door for a few minutes. My brother apologized in the flat, performative way people apologize when they know there won't be any real consequences. The officer looked at me once before he left, and I saw something in his face I didn't have words for at 14. I have them now. It was the look of someone who knew this wasn't the last bad thing that was going to happen to me in this house and couldn't do anything about it. I went to bed without saying a word to my brother. 3 weeks later he did it again. Not the same thing. Worse. My mother had asked him to drive me to my orthodontist appointment downtown, then bring me to school. It was a Friday. He dropped me off at the orthodontist, said he'd be back in 45 minutes, and drove away. I sat in that waiting room for 2 hours. The receptionist kept giving me looks. When I finally went outside, his car wasn't in the lot. I called the house from the office phone. No answer. I walked to school. It was 2.5 miles. I arrived at noon, missed 2 classes, and my teacher marked me unexcused. When I got home that afternoon, my brother was on the couch watching television. "What happened?" I asked. "Brianna needed me," he said, not looking up. That was the entire explanation. Brianna had needed him, and so I had ceased to exist. I did not tell my mother. I'm not entirely sure why. Part of it was that she was exhausted. Genuinely, visibly exhausted. And I didn't want to add to it. Part of it was that I'd learned, in the months since my father left, that telling her things made her cry, and then feel guilty, and then try to fix things in ways that made everything more tense. And part of it, the part I've never been entirely comfortable admitting, was that I still believed my brother would eventually choose me. That there was some version of him, underneath the irritation, who actually considered me worth choosing, I kept believing that until the day he proved me wrong in a way there was no coming back from. It was January. I was 15 by then, just barely. My mother had been called into an extra shift, and my brother was supposed to take me to a Saturday academic program I'd been accepted to, a state-level math enrichment thing at a university campus 40 minutes away. I had worked for 3 months to get into it. There were only 12 spots in the county. I had stayed up until midnight the week before finishing the application essay. He drove me there. He walked me inside. He spoke to the program coordinator, a woman named Dr. Patricia Noel, and confirmed he would pick me up at 4 o'clock. He shook Dr. Trisson, Noel's hand. He patted me on the shoulder. He said, "Have a good day, kid." He never came back. 4 o'clock came and went. 5 o'clock. Dr. Noel stayed with me herself, making calls from her office. She reached my mother's hospital ward and left a message. She tried the home phone 4 times. She reached my brother on his cell at 5:40, and I was standing near enough to her desk to hear his voice through the receiver, though not the words. I could hear the tone, unbothered, explaining something, taking his time. Doctor. Noel's face went very still in the way faces go still when a person is working hard not to show what they're actually thinking. She drove me home herself. On the way, she asked me quietly whether this kind of thing happened often. I looked out the window at the highway lights. "Sometimes," I said. She nodded once. She didn't say anything else, but she handed me a card before I got out of the car. Her direct number. "For anything," she said. "Not just the program." My brother was at Brianna's that night. My mother was still at work. I sat at the kitchen table with Dr. Noel's card in my hand and thought, very clearly for the first time, I am the only person who is going to take care of me. It should have been a devastating thought. Somehow it wasn't. It felt like putting something down that I'd been carrying without realizing how heavy it was. My mother came home at 7 in the morning. I told her everything. Not just that night. Everything. The November gas station. The orthodontist. Every time. I watched her face move through emotions I didn't have the emotional vocabulary to fully track. By the end, she was crying. Not dramatically. Just quietly, in the way she cried when she was genuinely ashamed. She confronted my brother that afternoon. I don't know exactly what was said, because she asked me to stay in my room. What I know is that he left for Brianna's house 30 minutes later and didn't come home for 4 days. When he did come back, he was polite to me in the careful, distanced way people are polite to someone they've decided to stop seeing as fully human. He stopped giving me rides. My mother arranged everything else herself. 6 months later, he moved in with Brianna officially, and I stopped thinking about him almost entirely. I had other things to think about. Dr. Patricia Noel had not forgotten me. She'd reached out to my mother in the weeks after that January night, not to report anything or create problems, but to ask whether I had any academic support in place. I didn't, particularly. She connected us with a county program for high-achieving students from lower-income households. I got a tutor. I got access to AP classes my school didn't offer. I got, for the first time in my life, adults in my corner who treated my potential like something real and worth protecting. I was angry for a long time. Not the dramatic, cinematic kind of angry. The quiet, low-burning kind that lives in the back of your chest and shapes the decisions you make without you always realizing it. I was angry when I studied. I was angry when I applied to colleges. I was angry when I got into 3 of them and chose the one with the best pre-law program, 5 states away, on a scholarship I'd applied for 17 times across different organizations before one finally came through. I did not invite my brother to my graduation. My mother came. She cried when they called my name. She hugged me so hard afterward that I could feel how sorry she still was, and I let myself receive it. She had made mistakes. She had made mistakes. She had been exhausted and overwhelmed, and had failed to see what was happening under her own roof. But she had also shown up, consistently in the years after, in every way she was capable of. I had chosen to keep her. I had not chosen to keep my brother. He had tried to reach me twice in those years. Once through our mother, asking if I wanted to come to his wedding. I didn't respond. Once by email, a long message about how he'd been in therapy and was working on himself and wanted the chance to explain things. I read it twice. I did not reply. I wasn't performing indifference. I genuinely had no interest. He was not a wound anymore. He was simply someone I used to know. I graduated law school at 27. I passed the bar on my first attempt. I joined a firm that specialized in child welfare and family law, which surprised some of my classmates and surprised me not at all. Dr. Patricia Noel sent me flowers. I called her and we talked for an hour. She told me she'd expected this from the moment she saw me sit down quietly in that waiting room instead of panicking. I told her I'd been panicking on the inside. She laughed and said that's what composure is. I had been at the firm for 8 months when I got the message. Not an email this time, a voicemail, left on my work line, which meant he'd gone out of his way to find it. His voice was different than I remembered, older. Something strained underneath the surface. He said he needed to talk to me. He said it was urgent. He said it was about something legal, something serious, and he didn't know who else to call. I played it twice. Then I called my mother. "Did you give him my work number?" I asked. A pause. "He called me asking if you were okay. I told him you were doing well, that you'd become a lawyer. I didn't think he'd..." Another pause. "I'm sorry. I should have called you first." "It's okay," I said, because it was, mostly. I sat with the voicemail for 2 days. I consulted exactly no one on what to do next, because it was not actually a complicated question. I called him back on a Wednesday morning from my office, door closed, coffee untouched on the desk. He answered on the second ring. "Lily," he said. He sounded relieved, which I found interesting. "You called my work line," I said. I kept my voice level. "I know. I'm sorry. I didn't have any other way to..." "What's the issue?" A breath. Then he told me. He and Brianna had bought a house 4 years ago. The mortgage had been structured badly, and they hadn't fully understood the terms. He said this in a way that suggested he was still not fully taking responsibility for not understanding the terms, and they were now facing a foreclosure proceeding. He'd tried 2 lawyers already. One had told him the situation was close to unworkable. The other had taken a retainer and not returned calls. He'd found my firm online. He'd seen my name. "I'm not asking for a favor," he said quickly. "I'll pay, full rate, whatever you charge. I know you will," I said. Another pause. Longer this time. "I know I don't have any right to ask you for anything," he said. I noticed he did not say he was sorry for specific things. He said the general, ambient version of sorry that people say when they want absolution without accountability. "I'm going to be honest with you," I said. "I don't know if I'm the right attorney for your case. There may be a conflict of interest in the sense that I am not a neutral party. I will look at the documents and assess whether the situation is something within my firm's capacity. If it is, I will refer you to a colleague here who is very good. If it's outside what we handle, I'll give you a referral elsewhere." Silence. "You're not going to take my case yourself," he said. Not quite a question. "No? Because of what happened?" "Because I'm not a neutral party," I said again. "That's the professional reason. The personal reason is that I don't have any interest in building a working relationship with you." He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Thinner. "I think about that a lot," he said. "What I did. Specifically, the university thing, leaving you there. I think about it more than you'd probably believe." "I believe you," I said. "And I did, actually. I was so selfish. I didn't think about what you were going through. I only thought about what I wanted." "I know. I'm sorry, Lily. I really am." I took a breath. I looked at the traffic moving on the street 12 floors below my window. "I hear you," I said, "and I want you to know that I'm not angry anymore. I'm genuinely not. I made my peace with it a long time ago, but I want to be clear with you about what that means and what it doesn't mean. It means I'm not carrying it anymore. It doesn't mean I want you in my life. It doesn't mean we're okay in the sense of being close. I don't need an apology from you to move forward. I already moved forward." Another long silence. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes. Do you think we could ever over time? Do you think there's any possibility? I don't know, I said. Honestly. Maybe. I'm not closing a door, I don't have to close. But I'm not going to pretend there's a warmth there that doesn't exist yet. If you do the work, the real work, not just the therapy speak, and time passes, and you show up consistently in ways that are about something other than what you need from me, then maybe. That's the most truthful answer I can give you. That's fair, he said quietly. Send the mortgage documents to the firm's general intake email. I'll have someone look at them by end of week. I set the phone down. I sat for a moment and checked in with myself, the way I'd learned to do, the way Dr. Knoll had modeled for me without ever explicitly teaching it. I looked for the anger, the old low burning thing. It wasn't there. Not even an ember. What was there instead was something I didn't have a clean word for, a kind of settled clarity, the feeling of a person who has walked a long way and arrived and looked back at the distance and felt neither regret nor triumph, just the plain factual knowledge of how far they'd come. I picked up my coffee. I had a 9 o'clock meeting. My colleague Marcus took the case. He is excellent, and he has no idea about any of the above because it's not relevant to the legal work. The documents came in, the situation was addressable with the right approach, and Marcus has been handling it professionally. My brother sends a text on my birthday now. I read them. I don't always respond. Sometimes I do. I'm not performing either the silence or the reply. I'm just deciding each time what I actually feel and what I actually want, and acting accordingly. That's the thing no one tells you about becoming who you were supposed to be. It doesn't feel like victory in the way you imagined it would when you were 15, standing in a parking lot in January watching the sky get dark and realizing no one was coming. It feels quieter than that, more permanent, less about them and more about you. My name is Lily. I am a family law attorney. I protect children who are in the situations I used to be in, and I do it well, and I go home at night to an apartment I chose and a life I built from the ground up, with no one's help but my own, and the people who decided without being asked that I was worth showing up for. That Thursday in November feels like someone else's life. In some ways, it was. I used to think that what my brother did to me was simply cruelty. A 19-year-old boy who chose his girlfriend over his 14-year-old sister, again and again, until one January afternoon he left me standing in an empty parking lot at a university campus and drove away without looking back. For a long time, that was the story I told myself, that he was cruel, that I was the one who paid the price, and that nothing about any of it was fair. But fairness is not actually how life operates. What life operates on is consequence. Every choice a person makes sends something outward into the world, and the world answers back, not immediately, not dramatically, not always in the way you expect, but always. My brother chose repeatedly and deliberately to treat me as something inconvenient rather than someone worth protecting. That choice didn't just hurt me, it shaped me. It pushed me toward people who did show up. Dr. Noel, the tutors, the scholarship programs, and it built in me a kind of self-reliance that no comfortable childhood could have given me. The thing he meant as dismissal became the first brick in something he could never have imagined on the day he drove away. That is not a comfortable truth. I am not saying I am grateful for what he did. Because I am not. I am saying that the consequences of his choices did not land only on me. They landed on him too, slowly, the way these things always do. While I was studying, he was drifting. While I was building, he was borrowing against a future he hadn't thought carefully enough about. By the time he called my work line looking for help, the distance between where I stood and where he stood was not something either of us had engineered. It was simply the accumulated result of 12 years of different decisions. Integrity compounds. So does its absence. What I want anyone who hears this story to understand is that the most powerful thing I ever did was not confronting my brother, not declining to take his case, not delivering a composed speech from behind a desk 12 floors above the street. The most powerful thing I ever did was decide, at 15 years old, sitting alone at a kitchen table with a stranger's business card in my hand, that I was going to take my own life seriously, even if no one around me did. That decision, quiet, private, made with no audience, is where everything else started. Character is not built in the moments when someone is watching. It is built in the moments when no one is, when you are cold and tired and the person who is supposed to come for you hasn't, and you choose any way to keep going. Intelligence without that kind of character is just cleverness. Resilience without it is just stubbornness. But when those three things, the moral commitment, the disciplined mind, and the refusal to be broken, work together, they produce something that circumstances cannot take from you. Not abandonment. Not neglect. Not 12 years of silence. I am Lily. I am a family law attorney. And the parking lot where my brother left me is the reason I show up every single day for the children who are still waiting for someone to come. Nobody is coming for them. So I do.